How's it going? This is Keanu Yamamoto with the Coachers Podcast, sitting here with Coach Steve Pyne, head ball coach at Union High School in Vancouver, Washington. Coach Pyne was a longtime head coach at Central Catholic in Oregon, where he won 5 state championships. Coach, thanks for jumping on. Please tell us about your family, your journey, your background, all that good stuff.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Well, coaching background, after high school, I played 1 year of college ball at Western Oregon, and went back to for my sophomore year, and for whatever reason, my mind wasn't in playing anymore. So I reached out to my former head coach, George Rawlis, and asked him, hey, would it be possible if I came back to Portland and coached, the JVs or whatever while I was still in school at Western Oregon? Well, if you know the distance there, it's about 140 miles round trip. And so I was getting out of class at, 2:00 or whatever, and getting in my car and driving home, coaching, and then getting in the car and driving back to Monmouth. And I did that for 2 years for gas money and just caught the bug, right? From there, when I graduated college from Western Oregon, I had sent out, I want to say, about 400 letters looking for a GA position across the country. Back then, you had to send letters. You couldn't just email or,
Yeah.
DM or anything like that. So of those
Do you still
400
have
letters,
a letter? Do you still have a
What?
copy of that letter sitting around somewhere?
I'm sure it's in somewhere. I'm sure
Yeah.
there's somewhere. Of all those letters I sent out, I got 2 positive responses, and both were on the East Coast. And at the time, it was like, you have to go into like marine biology or something like that. I'm like, well, that's not for me. So then I graduated from Western, and I went and did my teaching program at Boise State and got on with the Emmett High School staff there. And for 3 years, worked for a guy named Laverl Pratt, and he knew his stuff, but he was a tough, old school, tear you down type of guy. And his tenure ended, and I think I was 25 or 26 at the time. I applied for the job. I was one of the final 2. And they gave it to another guy who deserved to get the job, Larry Nigro, who was Mark Speckman's defensive coordinator at Merced High School. And at that point in time, I had planned on sticking around, and then Dan Wood at David Douglas called me and says, hey, we're looking to add an offensive line coach, and we have an English teaching position open. Would you be interested? And I was like, yeah, that would be great. John Harrington, Joey's dad, was the principal at that time. And so went back there, was the offensive line coach and the freshman offensive coordinator for 4 years, I think, when Dan's oldest boy, Justin, was the quarterback, and did that for 4 years. And then the Wilson High School job, which is now Ida B. Wells, opened up. And the principal at Wilson High School was a former David Douglas guy. He was a fishing buddy with one of our vice principals, the old boys network, if you will. So I applied for that job. My son was 2. My daughter had just been born, or was, I think maybe going to be born. And I told my wife, like, I just want to go through the process and see what this is like. They're not going to offer me the job. I'm too green. And so they offered the job, came back, and she's like, well, we'll make it work. And so I was at head coach at Wilson for 4 years, and we had a little bit of success. I think we were 21-17 in the 4 years there, got to the playoffs a couple times. We were 9-0 my last year, won the Portland Interscholastic League, and had everybody coming back. I mean, everybody coming back. And so I was like, all right, we got a chance to really make a run at this thing this next year. Well, this is a crazy story. So I'm sitting in my office with my uniform rep, who is friends with people at Central Catholic, and Joe Bushman had just left that job to take the Lakeridge job, I believe. He said, would you be interested in coaching at Central Catholic? And I said, well, not really. I don't want to take a pay cut and a retirement cut, and we're going to be really good next year. And he's like, oh, okay, no problem, no problem. So literally maybe 10 minutes later, the phone rings in my office, and I pick up the phone, and this guy named Jeff Kirsten, who is connected with the Central Catholic community, was an official in the area for a long time. And he's like, hey, I keep asking around, and your name keeps coming up for, as the next kind of up and coming guy, whatever. He goes, would you be interested in coaching at Central Catholic? And I'm like, I told him the same thing. No, I'm not interested. I don't want to take a pay cut, blah, blah, blah. Literally 10 minutes later, the phone rings again as the AD from Central Catholic. So this all happens in about a 30-minute span of time. And I was
Full
raised
court press.
What's that?
It's that full court press for there.
Yeah, pretty much. Anyway, I was raised Catholic and I was like, well, something's going on here. And so I talked to the AD. I said, call me tonight at home and we'll talk. So he called me and I think we spoke on the phone for about 3 hours. And he said, can you come in tomorrow for an interview? I said, is it you and me and a cup of coffee or what's going on? And he goes, no, it'll be like a 12-person interview committee. I was like, okay, can we make it in the afternoon? He's like, yeah, that's fine. So I call in sick and I change all my Wilson stuff to Central Catholic stuff, go to Kinko's, get it all printed up, go in to the interview. We walk out of the interview. The AD walks me out and he goes, we're going to offer you the job. I said, well, you haven't talked to anybody. We just walked out. He goes, no, we're going to offer you the job. I said, well, I'm going to need the weekend to think about this, and talk it over with the wife and stuff. So she and I talked. And one of the things I told her, I said, we're going to be really good next year at Wilson. I don't know if it's going to be sustainable, right? Just because it's a different beast when you're at a private school and a public school, right? I said, and if this works out right, both Zach and Allie will be able to go to school there. We lived in the David Douglas School District at the time. Not that it was a bad school, but there's some advantages to going to a private school. And so she's like, all right, well, we'll go for it. And honestly, Zach was the most upset because he loved the hot dogs at Wilson High School's concession stand. That was his big thing. So we go to Central, and 21 years later, 14 conference championships, 5 state titles, a runner-up. It was a really good time there. I have great memories, great relationships with former coaches and players and ADs and principals and all that kind of stuff. And then this challenge presented itself, and now the wins and losses haven't been what I want at Union, but I don't say this to toot my own horn, but I was telling the kids at one point, I'm like, listen, I could stay here for 10 years and lose every game, right? I'd still have a winning record as a coach. So I've got that covered. I said, but what's more important is that you guys are learning the lessons that you will take on in life. That's more important to me than winning and losing, and the wins will take care of themselves eventually around here. We'll get enough guys on the right page at the right time to win. And so we're moving in that direction. So that's kind of the coaching journey. And then all along, my wife, Erica, has been my stalwart. And she's just been amazing. She didn't know what she was getting into. She'd been an athlete, soccer, cheerleading, that kind of thing, but she'd never been around a football guy or football atmosphere. And then obviously, my son and my daughter both, my son was an equipment guy at Oregon. My daughter was a football assistant, office gal at Linfield. So
Yeah.
football's been really good to our family that way. And the connections and the friends and all that stuff that we've made over the years has been, life-changing.
Yeah.
So there's the journey.
Long time coaching, a lot of success at Central Catholic. I mean, is there a particular year or particular team that you look back on, you're like, wow, that's like the epitome, or that's like what it should look like right there?
Well, there's so many great groups of kids, but that 2013 team was like I don't know. They set the bar, right? Now, the teams in front of them, the Brennan Scarletts, the Alex Balducci's, the Mick Hartwigs, the guys like that had set that stage, that got to the semifinals when they were seniors. And then the next year we kind of slid back when those guys were sophomores and freshmen. They saw what it looks like in both those instances. And a guy like Connor Humphreys, who ended up being a Army All-American and played at Arizona State, he was that kind of that standard setter for our program. And when we look back at that group, Ryan Nall, Cameron Scarlett, Aiden Wilder, Zach Davis, Blake Brandel, who's playing for the Minnesota Vikings still, Oregon State Beaver, Riley Gallant played at UC Davis, TJ Salute played for the Naval Academy, James Corey played at Southern Oregon, and Joe Wilson played at Wesleyan. So we have 5 college level offensive linemen. Oh, and then we had, 2 Pac-12 tailbacks. The joke I always tell is a lot of people say in 2013, a monkey could have won with that team. And I said, yeah, a monkey did win with that team. That was a high water mark in terms of on-field performance, the way those guys just loved each other and competed against each other and had each other's backs. And there were so many little memories in that year, go down to Sheldon and beat Sheldon, who had not lost at home in like 12 years.
Oh, they were rolling, man. They were
Yeah,
rolling.
they were rolling. And then, Semifinals, we beat Tigard 83-49. I mean, it was like a video game. We had 7 one-play drives. To one point, my defensive coordinator switched over. He goes, "Would you put a drive together so we can stay off the field?" I'm like, That's never been said before,
Yeah.
to the offensive guys. So anyway, that was a great group. But 14 again, we repeat, and then we get there in 16 with a group that probably shouldn't have been there, but they caught lightning in a bottle, in the playoffs, and then go 19, 21, 23. It's crazy the blessing it was to be a part of those kids' lives and allow them to have that opportunity. And I have great coaches, phenomenal coaches over the years, for sure.
Yeah. Speaking about, assistant coaches, what are some of the qualities you're looking for in an assistant coach?
Yeah, I think that they've got to be great role models, great examples of what you want your kids to become, right? Football aside, you can coach football, you can teach football scheme and technique and that kind of stuff, but are they there for the right reasons? You're right. The guy that's like, "Hey, can you give me another $1,000 or $2,000 because my time is valuable?" That guy, I don't have time for that guy. And, I would love to pay all my assistant coaches more than we're able to pay them. But it's the guys that, are all in. They're all behind the mission and the vision that you have in your program. And I just think it's genuine human beings, right? Low ego with a high competitive spirit,
Yeah.
right? They don't care who gets the success. They just want kids to grow and learn and take away from the game maybe what they took from the game. That's what I'm looking for in an assistant coach.
You kind of mentioned it early on. I played 1 year at Western, and you were commuting back up to Portland to coach JV. So
Yeah.
what was the why behind wanting to get into coaching? Because that's a big commitment, man. That's a big
Yeah.
commitment, especially as a college
Uh,
student.
Yeah. Well, my grades suffered pretty severely those 2 years too. I think for me, I had a chance when I was in high school. We used to go down and coach these middle school clinics, and it just was fun to be around the game and see the impact that you might be having on a young person's life, to see that aha moment for them sometimes. I think that's what kind of clicked with me. And honestly, you ask my siblings, I can barely use a screwdriver. I'm not good at math. I don't know. I'm not very inventive or anything like that. This was the one thing that I knew kind of inside out and backwards. And what I've learned over the years is that management piece, that being the CEO of an organization piece, how to delegate, how to give some autonomy to your coaches and let them grow in those roles while still having a, kind of a 10,000-foot view, but be able to come back down and say, "Oh, no, I don't think that's going to work. And here's why I don't think it's going to work." Or, "Hey, you have a great idea. I'm here to support it, but I can't take your idea and make it my idea. I don't have the time or the capacity to do that because I've got A, B, C, D through Z on my plate right now. But I love your idea. So tell me how I can support it." So those are the kinds of things that I feel like I've been pretty good at. I'm sure that some of my assistant coaches would say not at all, and
Yeah.
that's okay too. But I think that's kind of we talked about the why a little bit, but it was just, I don't know, it's in my DNA to be a coach.
Yeah.
I've coached, obviously coached football, I coached softball, I coached golf, I've coached basketball, done some track and field, all that stuff. It's fun to see kids' growth in those arenas.
Yeah, I asked this question to another coach, and it kind of just, you brought it up kind of organically. Is like, and this was a college basketball coach that I asked it to. Is like, how do you go about balancing? Hey, you're trying to develop these athletes, develop these kids, but at the same time, just like you said, you're trying to develop these coaches and help them become better coaches as well. How do you go about balancing that?
Well, I think that with coaches, you've got to give them opportunities to develop professionally, whether that's going to clinics, clinicking among your staff, forcing them to get up in front of their peers and explain a technique or a drill or a scheme, and then have people kind of tear that apart and have an answer for an answer for an answer, the old Chip Kelly thing. Those are the ways that, to me, allow coaches to grow. Right. And then as they grow, you have to reward that growth when appropriate. Right. So if that means that they're going from a position coach to a coordinator to a level head coach, whatever the case, whatever their desires are, trying to support those desires as best you can. Sometimes it works, and sometimes there are good people in front of them that are going to be there for a while. Right. and are productive. And sometimes you don't want to rock the boat either, just to rock the boat. You got to be like, hey, here's the deal. This guy over here, who's my coordinator, he's really, really good. And it shows out, production wise. It doesn't mean that you don't know what you're doing, but if you can hang on and continue to learn and continue to grow and bring value, that'll be your opportunity one day. And some guys can understand that and other guys got to jump. That's why I jumped. I was never going to be the head coach at David Douglas. John Harrington told me that. He said, you will never be the head coach at David Douglas, which was at the time my dream job because I graduated from there and grew up in the area and all that. He said, I will, as long as I'm the principal, I'll never hire a coach here who doesn't have head coaching experience. So I bolted. The first chance I got, I was like, all right, I'm going to go be a head coach so one day I can come back here. Well, obviously that didn't work out, but I needed to put myself in that position. So I think that, again, developing those coaches, giving them as much support as they need in their professional growth, challenging them in their professional growth, right? Maybe you've been a defensive back coach your whole life, but you want to be a head coach one day. Well, you better go coach the offensive line. You better go, coach the quarterbacks a little bit so you know what the hell you're doing. So when you have those conversations with those people as a head coach, you don't sound like a bumbling idiot, right? You can have a intellectual, honest conversation about like, hey, I don't understand what you're trying to achieve here because this looks like this versus, hey, that's a really great idea. I don't see many holes in it. Run with it, right?
Yeah.
Versus just like, here, go do it. And you just kind of like, oh, I hope it works. You got to be able to have those conversations and have
Yeah.
those experiences as a coach.
At what point in your career, you mentioned, kind of letting the reins go or loosening up on the reins a little bit. At what point in your career did you establish that trust, not only within yourself, but with others, where you could feel like you could take a step back and take a bird's eye view approach to things?
Yeah, that's a
Because
great
I know
question.
I'm assuming that doesn't happen right out the gate.
No, no.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, I was an offensive minded guy. Even though I played defense, I always liked the offensive creativity part of it. So I've always had a defensive coordinator who I just kind of like, this is what I want us to be in theory, right? Schematically. Now you go find the best way to teach that and the best system and all that kind of stuff. From an offensive standpoint, my first 4 years at Wilson and my first, I want to say 10 years or so, maybe 8 years at Central, I called the offense and I was the offensive coordinator. Well, one of the guys that played for me at Wilson came over as soon as he graduated, came over and started coaching for me at the freshman level. And he was a guy that, really, really bright guy, football IQ off the charts. And he just started kind of creeping along the path, right? It was a freshman coach, and then he was a freshman coordinator, then he was a JV coach and a JV coordinator, and then he was coaching our tight ends at the varsity level and, was kind of my guy in the sky and that kind of thing. And I want to say it was probably 2010 or 11. I started letting him call plays in the second half because he knew what I wanted and he had cut his teeth with me, so to speak. But the thing, when I turned it over to him, I was completely comfortable because he was a guy that consistently would challenge us to think differently, right? He'd walk into our Sunday meetings and go, what do you think about this? Tear this apart. I want to know why we can't do this. And I was just, damn, this kid's sharp, right? And so when I turned it over to him, I think again in 2011 or something like that, our offensive production went up because I got out of the way, right? Somebody else could have that vision and that time. And honestly, it took a lot off my plate. I wasn't writing scripts every day. I was watching film, but I wasn't watching the volume of film that I would as an offensive coordinator. So it allowed me to do some other administrative things. And so he was our offensive coordinator for 3 of those 5 state championships. And his offenses, I think if we went back over I bet we averaged 42 to 45 points a game in his time, right? And then he had some life changes, got married, gonna have a kid. We tried to get him a job in the building. It didn't work out. And so he moved to Idaho and was coaching over there. And now he's in Tacoma, coaching up there and doing what he loves to do as well. But, it took me then a little while to get back in that group because there was no one else on my staff at that time that I really felt comfortable with running the system that we had created and tweaking it in ways that were productive versus just, throwing it up against the wall and seeing if it sticks. We run like 3, maybe 4 run schemes and 3 or 4 quick game schemes, 3 screens and maybe, I don't know, 2 play actions and 4 vertical concepts or whatever. I mean, we're not overly complicated. And what I want our kids was to play fast, and he understood that, right? And not necessarily tempo fast, but play fast in their mind. Like,
Hmm.
hey, I know this play. It doesn't matter the formation. I know who I am and where I'm going. I'm going to be where I'm supposed to be when I'm supposed to be there, kind of thing. So over the last, so from 2020 on, or maybe it was 21, I got more comfortable with it, and I was to the point where I was going to turn it over to somebody when I left. And so the last 2 years I've been, coordinating at Union, but I'm going to hand it off to a guy named Sonny Cravens this year who has offensive coordinator experience. And I think we think a lot alike. And he's kind of a young go-getting coach. And so I want to have him have that opportunity to put that on his resume because I don't need it on mine anymore.
Yeah,
And it'll give me
that's
more
good.
time.
That's a good answer, Coach. You kind of touched on it from a scheme standpoint, but from a cultural, from a value standpoint, what is your coaching philosophy?
Well, we want to create young athletes or young students of compassion and empathy, right? And that's if we can do that through the game of football and be there for them personally and professionally and relationally, that's the mission in a nutshell, right? For us is we want these people, these athletes to be the best version of themselves at any point in time in the 4 years that they're with us, or the 1 year, or the 4 weeks, or 9 weeks they're with us, or whatever, and hopefully take something beyond that. Now we have core values, right? We have this thing called crafted. It's on all of our back of our shirts, and it just stands for compete, relationships, accountability, finish, toughness, execution, dedication. And the funny story about that was I run a leadership council every year, and we were sitting. I read Randy Jackson's book, Culture Defeats Strategy, or I think it's something like that. And he talked about creating these core values with your leadership council kids. And we were in there one day, and they were throwing all these words up on the board, and we were whittling it down like, hey, this word's really similar to this word. So we end up with those 7 words up on the board. And one of my kids at the time, he looks up there, and goes, hey, coach, if you arrange that right, it says crafted. I was like, oh, that's some divine inspiration.
No
At
doubt.
Central Catholic, man, we're crafted in the image of God, right? We're going to be crafted young men, and we're going to be crafted young athletes. Everything we do is going to be crafted to an end. And so we've carried that over with us to Union. But I've been toying with trying to kind of redo that process with this year's leadership council to see, because they have to own it, right?
Yeah.
When you talk about culture is established by coaches, but it's run by players. And until your players run it and your players expect it and your players preach it, it's just some words on a paper or on a poster or whatever. They got to live it and breathe it, and they got to breathe life into it and expect it out of each other. And that's where we're trying to get to at Union, right? It's hard. This place is, uh, you know, it was much worse off than I had anticipated. They won a state championship in 2018. They've been very competitive since they opened in 2006, 7. Some really great players have come through there. But, when you're the third head coach in 3 years, a lot of things get lost in translation or transition, if you will.
Yeah.
And so we're trying to push that back. So I'm excited to have that opportunity. We actually have our first meeting this weekend, and so I'm going to put that exercise out there and see if they can come up with something that they can own. And maybe it turns out to be some kind of a, acronym of some kind.
If you can think of another good R&E one, I got recrafted right here.
Recrafted. I like that.
Recrafted.
I like it.
Um, Talk to me a little bit about your leadership style and kind of how that's evolved throughout the years from when you first became head coach to
Yeah.
where you're at now.
I think I've told this story many times. So from 1999 to 2010, I think for me, it was all about me, honestly. Even though we were, making relationships and had great, times and all that kind of stuff. But my ego was driving what was going on. I wanted to win and win and win and win. And we would win by sheer will, right? And we won. I have one losing season in my first, I don't know, 23 or 24 years as a head coach. But what happened was at Central, we made the quarterfinals in I believe, '07, '09, '10, and I was just like, well, '04, '07, 9, and 10. Excuse me, maybe 8, I can't remember. But we kept hitting that quarterfinal, like, hurdle, like, we can't get over this thing. What is going on? And so I did some self-reflecting, and I went out and I talked with some friends of mine from across the country who have been very successful. I sat down and talked with Steve Corey. I talked with Ken Potter, these guys that are legendary coaches in the state of Oregon. And, I was just like, it was like that light bulb moment. Put kids first and winning second. I was putting winning first and kids second, right? And as soon as we flipped that script in 2010, 11 at Central, it shot out of a cannon. And we
Yeah.
talked about it as a staff. We all read Joe Ehrman's book, and why am I trying to remember the name of it? Off the top of my head, I can't remember. But basically, the takeaway from his book is you need to ask yourself, what does it feel like to be coached by you?
Yeah.
And how are you expressing yourself to these young men? And their big thing was, it's players' job to love each other. It's the coach's job to love the players. And that really hit with me too. And so I made my staff, we all read it. We had like a book club kind of thing, and things started to change and things started to take off, and kids really, they had better relationships with each other, deeper relationships with each other, deeper relationships, better relationships with the coaches. I think there was more comfort level with some of those things. And I gotta, this kind of the epitome of when you get to that point and your culture is player led, right? So here's a story. 2019, we opened the season against our two of our first four. We're 2-2. I can't remember who we beat, but I know who we lost to. We lost to Eastside Catholic, and then we lost to Jesuit, right?
Two top
And
dogs there.
it was maybe the third quarter of the Jesuit game, and I'm on one on the sideline. The refs had got into my head and under my skin and all that stuff. And I am yelling and I am screaming at the officials about this and that and the other thing. And our inside linebacker, who was our ball boy when his brothers played for us and was a stud inside linebacker for us, I'm standing at like the 25 or 30-yard line barking at the officials. And I see him just beelining and running a dead sprint to me. And he's yelling at me. He goes, "You need to stop right now. We are feeding off of the energy you're giving us, and we are not together." And I was like, oh, what an aha moment for me as a coach. Like,
Yeah.
this kid got the message and I had lost the message, and he was comfortable enough with me relationally to have that conversation and confront me, not in the privacy of a room, but in front of all his peers and the fans and all that stuff. And that was a turning point in that year for us. I kind of went, yep, kids first, winning second. I got to be the example.
Yeah.
And we went on, won the state title that year, And so I think when you can get to that point, wins or losses don't matter, right? That culture will take care of itself. You're going to win the games you're supposed to. You're going to lose the games you're supposed to. And you might win some you're not, and you might lose some you're not supposed to. That's just the reality of the game, right? I think no one saw Indiana beating Ohio State this weekend, but they did. Right?
I was rooting for him, baby.
I was too. I think
I was rooting
Cignetti's
for him.
amazing, but
Yeah.
I just think that, all the odds are against you, but the culture that he's created there is evident on the field, right? It doesn't matter the time or the place, the score. They're going to compete their butts off to the end, and that's what we're trying to get to.
It was pretty cool to see Urban Meyer pay him his respects.
Yeah,
at post game, like, this is the best coaching job I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's amazing
in sports history. Yeah,
I want to know what that guy has in his coffee because I'd like to get a little piece of it.
No doubt, no doubt. You mentioned kids first, winning and losing second. Was there some actionable steps that you guys took, or was it just an approach and a tone change?
I think it was more of an approach and a tone change, but we talked more openly as well, with our kids about, hey, listen, we love you. We want you to be successful. We're trying to put you in the best position to be successful. You have to come and meet us halfway at the very least. We can't want it more than you want it. But we got a formula. We know how to do this, right? And I tell this story to kids all the time. I said, if I had a surefire plan to make you $1 million in the next 4 months, would you listen? And they're all like, yeah. I said, "Would you lean into that message?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah." I said, "I don't have that." I said, "But if you want to know how to win a state championship in the next 4 months, would you lean into it? Would you pay attention? Would you do everything we're asking you to do and the way that you know how to do it?" And if you say yes, we have a chance to do that, right? Because the first time through, you don't know what you're doing. I'm sorry. The first time you make it to a state championship game, again, I go back to Steve Corey. I called Steve Corey on Saturday morning. I said, "Hey, can we meet for breakfast on Sunday? I got to pick your brain because you've been here a few times and you've won it and you've lost it. I want to know, what'd you do the years you won? What was different the years you lost?" And so that was a really huge help for me, in learning that and having those coaching relationships and those guys that, take you under your wing, even though you're not a part of their program and you're competing against them every year.
Yeah,
Right.
no doubt.
But that was anyway, I lost my train of thought there, sorry.
No, it's all good. It's all good, coach. I appreciate you. Hardest decision you've ever had to make as a coach?
Well, from a personal standpoint or on the field?
Let's say both, because I mean they're both
Alright.
kind of intertwined in some regard.
Yeah, I think the hardest decision I made was leaving Central.
Yeah,
I was fully invested in that place, but, circumstances that were kind of, I think, out of my control had kind of reared their head over the last 5 years, and I just didn't feel like our players, our coaches, our program was getting the type of even just base recognition for what we had done. I mean, if you look over the last 12 years that we were there, like I said, 5 state championships, 6 championship appearances, multiple quarterfinal, semifinal appearances, and brand recognition, right?
hmm
I think Central Catholic was always kind of that, that other. They were good, but they were never going to get over the hump. And the type of, like I said, brand recognition and exposure, free exposure that the school got over the years, for whatever reason, in the last 5 years, it just wasn't appreciated in the way that I thought it should be. Now
sure.
I'm all for, I don't care if it's band or drama or Constitution team or Tiddlywinks Club. If they are winning at a high level, they're succeeding celebrate the crap out of them. Let everybody know in the community that, hey, we are really, really good at Tiddlywinks, right? So I think that's important. And it was more almost apologetic, like, well, we don't want to be known as this kind of school, a jock school, a school
Sure.
that's successful outside of the classroom. What they didn't ever publicize, I did, but I think from 2010 or 2009 to the time I left, our team was in the top 5 team GPAs in the Oregon or the OSAA Dairy Farmers of Oregon academic all-state list every year. Maybe one year we slipped out of it, but top 5, right? So academics matter to us. We pushed the classroom. We made sure that was a priority because we wanted our kids to have options at the end of their schooling, whether they went on to play or not. We wanted kids to have that opportunity to go to that school that was, an Ivy League school or a high academic school or whatever, or go to Southern Oregon or go to a trade school or go in the military because the better your grades are, the more money you're going to make in those trade schools, in those military programs, whatever. So I just think that there was a lot of that happened. So that was a very tough decision because it was my home for
Yeah.
21 years. My kids went to school there. I, had my dad and my grandmother passed while I was there, and the support of that community was incredible during those times. And I loved the place. I absolutely loved the place. But it was time for me, I think, just on a personal level to go. So that was that. On the field, I think the toughest thing, and again, I was kind of out of this one, but it was really tough. So in 2011, we had a kid named Hayward Demison who literally died on the field. He had a heart attack on the field, was revived, thankfully, by our neighbor at the time, who was a cardiac nurse. Come to find out he had a heart defect. He had 2 choices to make, take this surgery and never play again, but the heart would probably be better off, or take this experimental surgery, have a chance to play again, but no guarantees that the heart would be, as good. He
Yeah.
chose the latter, rehabbed, all that thing, came back his senior year. He was part of that 2011 group and rushed for 1,900 yards and got us to the semifinals. But that was a hard decision to say, yes, you can come back on the field,
No
right?
doubt.
But the doctors, his parents, all his family and stuff were like, "We're behind him." And I'm like, "You're absolutely sure?" Because I love this kid. He's a great kid, and I don't wanna see anything happen to him. And
That is a tricky situation. Like,
yeah,
just imagine if one of, like, the parents said no, but the doctors said yes.
right.
Does
Well,
that change your whole thought process?
absolutely. I'd
Yeah,
be like, "No, your mom or your dad or your sister, they don't want you out there. And you can be a part of our program, but man, I'd rather see you live to be 90 years old than to rush for 1,900 yards," you know?
yeah.
So I was guess kinda thankful that that wasn't the situation I was presented with, but that was a crazy, crazy time for
No
sure.
doubt. I couldn't imagine that. I mean, kudos to him. Did he end up going to play, collegiately?
He played a little bit at Southern Oregon for a little while, and then, life. He had a
Yeah.
girlfriend back in Portland and thought
Oh,
that
that'll get
that
you.
was the life, but he's doing really well now. He's in education, and he's coaching and that kinda thing, so, yeah.
Nice. All right, little one formation challenge. Okay, we're gonna put their offensive thinking caps back on.
Okay.
Hypothetical here, you can only go into a game running one formation. What's the formation and why?
One formation and why, I think it would be, ace, double tight, double wide with probably a pistol back, right?
Okay.
So you're balanced. You have typically good matchups, depending on personnel, good matchups at the tight end position against either undersized safeties or outside linebackers who are wearing neck rolls and number 50,
Playing guard too?
playing guard as well.
Yeah.
Maybe, you have the left, the right opportunity, right? You're not showing your hand formationally. There's no run strength. You get to balance out the defense. In my perfect world, I probably would be a double tight type of a team. I don't know that I would stay in balance double tight, but we honestly next year, I think that's kind of going to be our bread and butter. We've got,
Yeah.
a high tight end room that's young and really good. So we're going to utilize that. But I think to me, that was always what I kind of like. Portland State used to do that stuff, and I just really enjoyed watching what you can do out of that with play action and bootlegs and stretch, inside zone, duo, outside zone, mid zone, a counter tray, GY counter, whatever. There's so many things you can do with it. And then if you got a couple guys that can, burn on the outside, that makes it fun too, because you can max protect and burn on the outside.
Yeah. It's funny because never been a really big fan of that formation, but we played against UTEP when I was at Boise State. Because I've always, I don't know, just younger guy, 11P
Yeah.
spread, 10 personnel sets. Like that's kind of, that's what I did in Madden. That's what I did in
Yep.
Madden, right? But we go against UTEP and we should have won that game. Ended up getting upset by UTEP. But in the fourth quarter, I think they ran anywhere from 12 to 16 plays out of that formation. And given our base personnel package, we didn't have a lot of bullets that game, but we just could not get a jump. And they ran it out of pistol too. And then they would jump the back here and there, and we could not get a beat on where it was going. And they just grinded us out in the fourth quarter and just took a bunch of time off clock and beat us. So
There's
now I respect the hell out of that formation.
It was a little story on that. I was back in my early career, I was out in Arkansas, coach or speaking at a clinic, and I'm listening to this guy who was like the all-time winningest coach in Arkansas, multiple state championships, and he ran like the dead tee and just like three plays.
What is that? What is that? What is a
It's
dead team?
just a crazy formation. Like it's all 11 players are at the line of scrimmage or within 5 yards of the line of scrimmage. And it's like the wing tee, but it's, there's not a lot of movement
Yeah.
pre-snap or anything like that.
Okay.
So I'm talking to him afterwards. I'm like, they ran like three plays and maybe one pass play or whatever. I'm like, man, don't you get bored just doing the same thing over and over again? And this was old codger, and he just leaned back and shared. He goes, you know what, coach? I just love winning. I was like, all right, fair enough.
No
And
doubt.
that taught me a lot. Like, do what you are going to be, right? And don't deviate off of that. And that's one of the things I always tell our offensive coaches. Like, you can bring me an idea, but I got to know what we're taking out because we only have so much time in the week to prepare. And if you bring me an idea on a Sunday and you think we're going to run it on Friday, you're crazy because you better think 2 or 3 weeks in advance because we need some time to time this thing out and get good at it.
Just briefly, What
Yeah.
does that opponent scout process look like for you? Like when you're going to watch and you're breaking down film, are you I don't know how you guys do it, but everything, okay, as a GA world, you have to make a million different cut-ups. A
Right.
million different cut-ups, right? 11P, 10P, 12P, this formation, that run game.
Yeah.
Like, are you guys doing cut-ups? Are you watching the whole game and then going back and cutting stuff up? What's your process?
For me personally, I'm going to assign my O-line guy with, fronts and stunts. I'm going to tell my running back guy, you've got all the blitzes, right? And I'm telling my wide receiver guy, you've got all the coverages, right? And bring those with you, and then I'm going to watch the entire games, and I'm going to write my notes and make sure that they and I are on the same page. Like, hey, this is a odd front team. They're a slanting odd front team. They play a lot of what looks like cover 2, but it's really cover 4, or looks like cover 2, but is really rotating to 3 cloud, or whatever the case might be. And then we will watch together clips that I either we'll just watch a half of a game, or maybe there's weeks where I'll cut up some things and go, all right, so we have an issue with this front and this stunt. How are we going to block this versus that, or whatever? But mostly, God, I wish I had GAs. I would make life a lot easier
Yeah.
to do some of those cut ups and stuff. But I think that's something that we could honestly be a lot better at as a coaching staff, is to find those 8 to 12 plays in any game where you're like, all right, this is who they are, right?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter this is their main formation, this is their main inside run, their main outside run, their main quick game, whatever, or this is their base front. This is how they adjust to, double tight pistol backs or whatever.
You know what is one of the coolest things that I took from when I was at Boise? Coach Andy Avalos.
Uh-huh.
He was the head coach, but it was a DC at Oregon. His thing was he always liked to go watch teams 2-minute drill.
Oh,
If I could go watch their team 2-minute drill from a pass game standpoint,
yeah.
like coordinator and a quarterback, they're going to go to their bread and butter. And he believed that came up in 2-minute drill. And I think you could say it on the flip side too, unless teams are getting really exotic on some of those, if they're really trying to take you out of 2-minute drill. But I think you can say that too from a coverage standpoint. Like if I'm in oh shit mode and teams are pressing me,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? As a defense, and they're just throwing the ball on me, or the tempo's getting it to me, I'm going to my basic stuff. I'm going to like what I'm most comfortable
Yeah.
with.
What can your kids play the fastest at? And the
Correct.
most
Exactly what
comfortable?
you were talking about earlier as
Yeah.
far as keeping everything simple.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
that's great, man. I love that idea, because I
Yeah.
know when we get into a 2-minute drill, we stay in the same formation once we're out of the first play. It's like I'll call a play from the
Yeah.
sideline, and we might be in open trips or tight end trips or whatever. And then the very next play, we're going to be in tight right doubles, with tight right. And then I'm going to tell the tailback where to go. And then
Gotcha.
we're going to run it. And then every play after that, unless we're coming out of a timeout, is going to be out of that formation. So it'd be pretty easy to scout us. But to me,
Yeah.
it's the comfortability level in a 2-minute calling drill that I know our kids, this is what we start our offense in. And it's the thing we've been doing the longest, so they're going to be the most comfortable with it.
It's funny how like you will see 2-minute situations, NFL and the college game. Saw a lot of it breaking down film where, they're switching formations up. And
Yeah.
sometimes they're motioning to get indicators in 2-minute drill. It's like, what are you doing, man?
Yeah, that clock ticks, man. And I tell our kids all the time, like, you got to know the down distance. You got to know how many timeouts we have. You have to know the time on the clock. I said,
Yeah.
and sacrifice yards for time unless it's 4th down. It's okay to step out of bounds. You don't, it's amazing how kids don't get how they have to flip that switch in those moments, right?
Yeah.
And even our best guys are like, because you let the thoroughbred go, he thinks he can take it to the house as
Yeah.
the clock's going tick, 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 and he's dipping and diving and cutting it back cross
Do you
filling.
guys got any verbal cues or situational cues where it's, hey, first down, go down?
You know what? I don't know that we have done that.
Yeah.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. That was one thing that was harped on. And it was cool. One thing I loved that Coach Avalos did was he would make the DC and the offensive coordinator go up in the front of the whole team, and they'll watch a 2-minute drive and they'll talk about it, their thought process throughout that. But that was one thing that I loved. Like there were situational cues. And it's a little different now because now you have the headset
Right.
where it's like, hey, I call this play. I need you to go down at the sticks for whatever situation that pops up, whether it's we want to go and spike it. We don't want to drain too much clock, whether it's a Mayday emergency where we got to rush the field goal team out there.
Right.
But I always thought that was interesting.
I like that. I might have
Yeah,
to call Coach Avalos and
no doubt.
tell me more about this.
Yeah. Is there a drill or a team period that you do now that you wish you did sooner on in your career? Could be
Yeah.
indies, could be good on
Yeah,
good.
no, I think that one of the things that we started to do this year that I really liked, and we're gonna expand upon it, but I picked it up from Oregon, actually, down in their spring practice this year, and after they got done warming up and everything, and their early outs and blah, 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 they immediately went down to the 5-yard line, right? And it was receiver versus DB, and then it was tight end versus outside linebacker, then it was left tackle versus the rusher, then it was a center versus the nose, and then it was a slot receiver and and then a running back. So we started doing competition time,
I
right?
like
And
that.
trying to get the kids excited to start practice and that kind of thing. And it went pretty well, I think. I mean, kids were pretty excited, but you know, long about week 4 or 5, they kind of were like, oh yeah, here we go, competition time. So we probably should have spaced it out a little bit more.
Yeah.
But
When
one of
in
the things,
practice did you guys do it?
what's that?
When in practice did you guys do it?
Right.
Competition
So
time.
we do our warm-ups, and then we do this thing called FTF, or first things first, where
Yeah.
everybody in the whole program does basically a 5-minute circuit of blocking, tackling, that kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Oh, that's
Uh,
nice.
and then so we would then get right into FTF. So it was right after warm-ups, or excuse me, right after FTF, so we would get into this competition time on
Yeah.
Tuesdays, and then on Wednesdays, our competition was between our kickers, right? So
Oh,
we
cool.
would get up there and kick, a 33-yard field goal from the left hash, the middle of the right hash, and they were kind of competing to see who would be the guy kicking that week.
Yeah.
So
Oh, I
one of the
like
things
I like I like that.
one of the
I
things
think
that we're going to do next year is we're going to bring back board drills. I'm sure you've seen those or whatever.
yeah.
We just don't finish very well. We don't have guys that just are like, I'm going to kick that guy's rear end and I'm going to put his ass in the ground. So what we're going to do is we'll bring those boards out and we're going to match people up by position, O-line, D-line, wide receiver, DB, running back, linebacker, whatever. And we're going to do a 5-minute challenge period. If you own the board, you win the most, you get to autograph that board right then and there. And then we put
Wow.
it up in the locker room. And the guy that has the most autographs on that board at the end of the year is going to get to take it home at the awards banquet.
Nice. Where'd you get that one from? Did you just think
I
about
just
that or?
I know we always used to do board wars and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
I was like, we got to figure out a way to make this competitive and get our kids in a kind of a ass kicking mentality, like a
Yeah.
finish mentality. Like, I'm going to compete or die trying on this thing. And I tell you what, we're going to find out really quick in that competition period who really wants to compete.
I like that. Going back to your competition time, when we were in transition, when Coach Smith ended up taking the Michigan State job, Coach Kafense, you probably know him. He was there at
Yeah. Yeah.
Oregon State for a little bit. Willamette guy. He took over the interim head job for the bowl game. But one thing, exactly like you said, but he would just throw in random situations, and
Yeah.
it was never a structured time. It was whenever he felt like blowing the whistle, he blew the whistle. Everyone knew what the whistle went, and then he would give us a situation, whether it be one play, 3 plays at the
Right.
goal line, one fourth down scenario. And I thought that was good to trickle into practice. Like if you're having a doldrum practice or guys just aren't competing or they're not flying around at the right speed. Like
Right.
that was you just knew, you didn't know when it was coming. You didn't know if it was coming, but when it came, because it caught you off guard, it got everyone kind of jolted and, everyone pumped up for that.
I like that a lot. I think that's one of those things where at the college level makes it so much easier to do because everybody's playing on one side of the ball, right? And all
True.
of a
That
sudden
that
you're in the
is that
middle of
is
a
that is very true.
defensive period and you're like,
Yeah.
tweet. All right, offense down on the goal line. It's first and or fourth and goal from the 3. We got to score. All right, give me my best offensive guys, and then coach, you get the rest of the defense, and we'll see who wins. That kind
Yeah.
of thing. So, but you certainly need to do those things and put your kids in those situations on both sides of the ball. And I think we do a decent job of doing situational stuff, not as well as we should.
Yeah. Okay. Going on here. Anela question of the day. I told
Yeah,
you this before we got on.
got to
What
know.
is your favorite Christmas ornament and why?
Okay, well, I think we talked a little bit about that, but it was my Joe Montana quarterback, Notre Dame, figurine ornament back when our kids were kids, much like you have. the tree had a bunch of different ornaments on it, whether it was something that they made or maybe it was, keepsake or something like that. It was very random. Our tree was very random. And
Mhm.
as the kids have grown and got out of the house, I think my wife likes the kind of the more formal and you know, I don't know, uniform
Yeah.
uh ornaments and stuff. So all those ornaments are they're in a box somewhere. Maybe Zach or Allie will take them one day and use them on their tree when they have kids.
Gotcha. I know it's kind of fun because just decorating the tree with the kids,
Yeah,
and even all the round ornaments. My son just keeps on calling them football, basketball, soccer ball. I know it's not
that's
it, but
awesome.
we're getting there. What does team mean to you, Coach?
It means a selfless pursuit of a common goal. I really believe that. When you get that team that cares, like when you care about others and their success more than you care about your own, you're going to have success. You're going to have trying to get kids to understand like the better we have success, the more individual accolades and the more team, all league honors or all state honors or offers or whatever are going to come your way because not that a coach at the college level won't recruit a kid from a bad team if he's exceptional, right? But I can't tell you how many times I had kids who were average to a little bit above average that people would come to our school and recruit them because they knew that they've been around winning program. They knew how to take care of each other. They knew what team meant. They knew what having a role and embracing that role and being the best at that role meant. So that selfless pursuit of a common goal, I say that all the time. And right now, we're trying to get our kids to understand that you'll get yours when you give yours, right?
I like that.
But you're not willing to give yours yet. You want it all for you. Let's figure out how to give yours and it'll come back tenfold. It really will. And that's
Yeah,
been I'm speaking from experience. Like I said, in 2010, 11, I said, it's not about me and my resume. It's about these kids. Then all of a sudden things just took off. And
yeah,
I'm sure there's other circumstances than that. There's some kind of cause and effect there.
yeah. How well do you know? Gosh, I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. That's gonna kill me. Give me one sec. Gotta look at my
Yeah.
phone. Wilsonville head coach. Why am I
Oh,
blanking on
Adam?
his name? Yeah. So he has a. I had him on. I had him on earlier. I think he was the second guy that I interviewed, Coach Gunther, and he's awesome.
Yeah.
And one of the things that he did was they took the kids to the beach. I did a big retreat, but one
Yep.
of the games they played was a cookie eating game. So they broke kids up into different groups, and they had one volunteer, and you had to get the Oreo from your forehead into your mouth without using your hands. But the way he illustrated it, and he's very animated, and he gets
Right. Oh,
into it,
yeah.
was that you saw how much joy you had when the cookie guy got the cookie in his mouth, even though you had nothing to do with the success of him, but how
Right.
much you celebrated him and how happy you were that he succeeded.
Uh-huh.
He's like, that's what we got to translate to the football field. He's like,
Yeah.
we gotta be cookie guys. And I was like, dang, that's a
Love it.
great,
Love
great
it.
analogy
Yeah.
for, just being a teammate,
Yeah, that
and a
goofy
great
bastard,
parallel
he's pretty
crossover.
good.
Yeah, no doubt.
Hey, speaking of, if you ever I don't know if this came up, did he talk about his dad at all when you guys
Yes. So
unbelievable
he gave me
story.
the dad's story. He gave me the dad's story.
Unreal.
Yes.
I had him come and speak to our team at Central.
You talking about
It
the dad?
was yeah. It was every time I hear that story and every time I see his dad, I'm just so appreciative of him being willing to share that story because a lot of guys wouldn't, right? That's a
No
pretty
doubt.
traumatic event.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, pretty cool,
I would
people.
like to hear it from his mouth. I mean, it was great coming from Coach
Yeah,
Gunther's mouth, but I would like to hear
yeah,
it,
pretty,
how
pretty
how
amazing.
he told it. And I think Coach Gunther cut it down just a little bit for the sake of
Well,
the podcast.
yeah, I mean, yeah, having his dad tell it he's animated, he's very personable, he's very much, Adam's very much cut from the same cloth,
Yeah.
and it was impactful. The first time I heard it when he spoke at the Les Schwab Bowl with it, and then when I brought him out to our team to speak, boy, it really hit our kids about, reaching down and checking your guts, so to speak. Now, he always said I reached down and grabbed something else, but, you know, he was he was in it he was gonna get back to his family, right? And unbelievable that he survived that. It's crazy.
No, it is a good story.
Yeah.
You kind of touched on this a little bit earlier when we were talking about some of your teams at Central Catholic. Oh, but what separated the state championship team from the quarterfinal teams? Like, was it certain individuals, not necessarily talent? Was it characteristics that they embodied? What was it?
I think that experience has something to do with it, right?
Yeah.
So when you've been there and you've done that, you know you can do it again, right? So even if you were a freshman or sophomore when that team, got to the semifinals or the finals or whatever, you had that experience, so you might be able to get through it. But other times that happen is kids hadn't had that experience and didn't know what it looked like in that moment. And so maybe they fell back. But I think at the end of the day, it is, are your seniors playing their best football? Are they leading in the right way and bringing those others along with them and mentoring them and showing them that they are valued and loved? And are you taking care of the least of your crew? Every kid has to be that guy that everybody is pulling along with them. They may not be the best athlete or the best football player, but if they're accepted and they're loved and they're taken care of, things are in the right spot. And like in our 23 team, we had a young man who was developmentally delayed, and he was out there with us. He got on the field a few times, kickoffs and stuff like that. And every time he got on the field or even at practice, Dan was just another one of the guys, right? And that's really a credit to the kids that were on the team who could have gone a different way with that
Yeah.
versus accepting that kid, whoever that kid is. In Daniel's situation, it was obvious, but there's other situations where that kid maybe isn't, walking that jock line, if you will. He's kind of a outsider, but he's accepted into this group. I think when you have those kind of kids who are willing to accept others and not, put anything on them, like one of the biggest things that we talk about is, have you read the book, The Twin Thieves? Have you ever read that?
No.
I
Nope.
highly recommend it.
Twin
Okay.
Thieves.
The Twin Thieves. And basically, it's the fear of failure and the fear of judgment are the two things that steal the most from us in life,
Yeah.
right? And getting kids to understand that fear of failure, you're going to fail. Every day you wake up, you're going to fail throughout the day. Well, some things are easy to hide or easy to accept because your toothpaste fell in the toilet or your toothbrush fell in the toilet,
That's a
right? You
bad start to
fail.
the day. That's a
You
bad
fail.
start to the day. Yeah.
An accident, you failed versus, not fumbling on the 1 yard line going in to win the game. That's just a failure, right? We fear those things. And when we fear those things, that's when those usually happen. But the bigger one for teenage kids is that fear of judgment. They are so worried about being judged by their peers, by their parents, by the community, whatever the case might be. I tell them all the time, like, listen, I know there are a lot of people in my 25, 27 years of being a head coach who do not like me for whatever reason, and I don't care. Judge me all you want. The only people that I care about are my wife and my kids and my coaches and this group of kids right here, right now, right? That's all I care about. Everybody else can judge me for whatever decision or whatever play call, or, they can judge me for, swearing in the locker room, like we talked about before we got on. They can judge me all they want. That's fine. I'm not going to fear that, right? Because I know where my loyalties lie. I know what I'm going to do to help our kids and our coaches have the best chance to succeed, whether that's wins and losses or whether that's going on and having a great life and being a productive member of society. That's the end goal, right? I don't have much. I've got a few years left on this earth, but maybe not as many as I'd want. And so if I can leave that, I don't care how many games we win. And we will win because that'll take care of itself.
Yeah. No, I'll definitely take a look at that. But I love book recommendations.
Yeah, that's a great
Love
one.
book recommendations. Kind of going on to that though, being afraid of failure. And I got on with a gentleman, Doug Summer,
Oh,
at
yeah.
Gladstone. One of the big things that he mentioned was, just their youth program for however many years. The youth program was non-existent.
Right.
They didn't have a youth program for 4 years. But one of the things that came up in discussion was like sports at a young age or sports in middle school or high school, but especially at that youth level, it is so important because you fail so many times
Uh-huh.
and you mess up so many times. And it's just being comfortable with not, I guess, succeeding and then, standing right back up and doing it again. So I love that conversation with Coach Summer. How do you go about, you mentioned leadership council.
Yeah.
How do you go about, empowering the kids and giving them shared leadership within the team?
Well, I think you have to like with our leadership council, I've done it a couple different ways. I've had them apply, I've had kids vote for who they believe should be on it. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who's on there as long as they realize that every single one of them, whether they view themselves as a leader or not, and every kid in your program, whether they view themselves as a leader or not, are leading. You're
Yeah.
leading somebody somewhere, right? By your actions, by your decisions, by your interactions, the way you treat people, all those things are leading people somewhere. So when we start talking about leadership skills, we always use, I've used the Twin Thieves in my leadership council. I've used, the energy bus. I've used you went in the locker room first, so just giving them some tools that they can put in their belt that you don't have to yell. Yelling and screaming doesn't mean you're a leader, right? It just means you're loud. And then being quiet doesn't mean you're not a leader, right? You can lead in a lot of different ways. You got to find those ways that work for you, and you have to be able to earn the respect of your teammates, right? I tell our best players, I'm like, if you're not the hardest working guy on the team, this team's not going to be as good as they can be. Because if you have all this talent and your work ethic is not up to par, and then you start getting frustrated or you try to start leading people, you're going to ring hollow because you're not the hardest working guy on the team. You're not the first one there and the last one to leave and all those things. And I always tell kids this, like, if my expectations are here and my workload's here,
Yeah.
something has to change. You either got to up your workload or you have to lower your expectations. And either way is fine with me because I'm going to keep my job. I'm going to keep doing what I do, right? But I'd rather have you raise your work level to match your expectations. I think that that's where, when you get into that leadership piece, is how do you find those things as a leader? How do you recognize that kid and what he did that day? Are you walking right past him? Or are you stopping and saying, you know what? I saw you struggling today in that drill, but by the end, man, you were getting it, man. That's really cool. I'm happy for you. I'm proud of you. Man, that would go a long way. But how many kids don't have the capacity yet to be vulnerable with their teammates? That's teaching vulnerability to that way, accountability that way. And those are things that, again, will be tools in their toolbox for years and years and years, because there's a difference between what is perceived masculinity and what real masculinity is. And I think real masculinity is being able to own your stuff, be accountable, be vulnerable, and be able to have conversations, real conversations with other adults or other men or whatever, and move it forward, right?
Yeah.
We don't all have to be knuckle dragging Neanderthals. We got plenty of those in the world. We can be elevated a little bit and have those conversations that are very difficult sometimes, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God, getting kids to say that they love each other. You want to talk about pulling teeth? Like, I tell our kids all the time, man, you are loved. We love you. You got to tell each other you love each other. And we do this thing at the end of practice called a 3-2-1, right? So we break down and then we get a 3-2-1. So it's 3 handshakes, 2 hugs, 1 compliment. We force
Yeah.
our kids to be physical as much as possible. And I can't tell you how many times you got to push kids back into that, number one. And then once it's established, I might forget to say it at the end of practice. And they're like, hey, get a 3-2-1. I'm like, okay, they're starting to get it a little bit, right? Just those little touch points that they can have with each other. And then the challenge is to then don't do the same 3 guys or 4 guys or 5 guys every day. Reach out
Yeah.
to somebody different, right? And then we started doing something I took from Aaron Hazel at Nelson
Yeah.
this year is, I usually would ask a coach, hey, who did good in your position group? And I give them the breakdown, right? What I started doing, we do that day one. Like, hey, Coach Jones, who was the best guy in your group today? And he'd say, Toby. All right, Toby, today you got the break, but tomorrow you're going to stand up again and you're going to select a teammate for the break, and you're going to tell us what you appreciate about them and why you're giving them the break. Now, we force them to be a little more recognition during practice, have a mindset about that, about recognizing other people's efforts. And I think that was huge for us this year. Even though the record was the record, our kids started connecting with each other a little bit better and would have to stand up in front of their peers and be vulnerable in that moment.
Yeah.
I could, I'm not going to accept, well, I'm taking, Fred over here because he's my friend. No, 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 no. Why are you what did Fred do today that piqued your interest? Well, he really worked hard in this drill and he got better today and he made me better today. Cool.
It's so simple, but
Yeah,
like sometimes the simplest things it can be the most powerful. Like, because not only do these kids want validation from their coaches, they probably want more validation and respect from their peers.
certainly.
So
I
I
think that's
think it
huge.
just heightens, amplifies everyone's, I guess, want to or will to be
Yeah.
recognized by X person. I think that's smart. He's a good dude. I got to go on the road in January, and I went and stopped by. Beautiful campus, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
Really nice shopping center and food right next to it. But
Yeah.
he's a good dude. I
He,
got to speak with him a little bit.
he's on a trajectory to be one of those elite teams in the state of Oregon, in my opinion. They've got just about everything you could hope for in a suburban school.
Yeah.
They've got the right mixture of upper middle class and apartment kids and resources and all that stuff. And he's done a masterful job. I'm fortunate enough to coach with him this summer in the Les Schwab game and learned a lot from him. And you know, I have a ton of respect for him. They'll be around for a long time
Yeah.
in that
That's one of
station.
the guys that gentlemen or coaches I'm gonna get on
Good. He's a good one.
sometime in the future. Do you got any closing remarks, coach? Any acronyms, quotes, or values that you want to share for the good of the community?
No, the thing for me is, you know, I took this from Pat Summit, you know, Texas or Tennessee volunteer basketball coach forever,
Yep.
winning as coach until Gino came along. But she always used to end her practice with, "How are we going to do it?" And they would all say together. And I thought, man, that's really cool. Well, when I was at David Douglas, the big thing was count on me. That was the
Yeah.
big, you know, 3-word phrase that Dan Wood used, count on me, count on me. So we end every practice with how we're going to do it together. And everybody says, or excuse me, how we're going to do it. Everybody says together, count on me. We end every workout that way, every practice that way. And just a little bit of a reminder, like, and I'm sure everybody has their thing that they do at the end of practice, but I think that's one of those things that is important for that reminder every day. And the last thing I would say, especially for young coaches who are kind of getting into this thing or struggling coaches that maybe haven't had the success on the field that maybe they had desired, but when you will know you've got your kids where you want them to be when they start sounding like you in interviews, right?
Yeah.
That's huge. When they're saying the things that you've said to them in their interviews, in the media, whatever, you're on to something then, right? Those kids are buying into what you're telling them and they are internalizing those things versus just like, yo, man, I had a great game tonight. You know, did you see me do this and that? It's giving credit where credit's due. It's, you know, recognizing others, you know, and their efforts. So that'd be
No,
my
that's good.
closing thoughts there.
Just to kind of backtrack a little bit, you talked about touch points and you talked about how you guys broke down 3-2-1. When we were at Boise, one of the things I love that coach did was he brought in guest speakers to come and speak, and he brought in a longtime tennis coach there. And he was talking about just the value of touching, pats on the back, dapping people up, like just to get that continuity and that cohesiveness. He said,
Yeah,
just get in your touches, get in your touches.
there's a great study. I don't know if he referenced it, but it was about Steve Nash. Steve Nash led the NBA in touches when he was player. He would touch his teammates hundreds and hundreds of times during the game, right?
Yeah.
All of his teammates loved him and played hard for him and that kind of thing. I think there's something to that. When you celebrate
Yeah.
together, go pick your teammate up off the ground, pat him on the back, you know, that kind of thing. It's huge for culture.
No doubt. No doubt. Well, I appreciate your time, coach.
Absolutely. This was
That was, that
fun.
was, that was good. I wish I had like 10 more minutes when my wife's been outside with the
I
with
hear
the
you,
kids.
man. You got to do that dad
They're
thing.
they're coming back in. I want you to see them real quick.
That would be
Take
awesome.
my headphone.